Sawadee-ka. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're starting a new book. It's titled The Natural Law of Kamma. It's volume 6 of our book series, The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. In this new book, it's specific teachings related to the natural law of Kamma, where you can dive in and see some of the detailed teachings from the Buddha on this important topic. But we could really say the entire book series is the natural law of Kamma, because in one way or the other, the Buddha is helping you to be able to see this cause and effect, or this action and result, the results of your decisions. And in this particular book, while it explores intricacies of the natural law, you could really say all the teachings of the Buddha are teaching the natural law of Kamma in one way or another. This is the natural law that your mind is awakening to. Among others, there's other natural laws like dependent origination and things like this, but it's the natural law of Kamma that is showing that cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. And when you're making decisions wisely, you'll experience wholesome results, or wholesome Kamma. And when you're making decisions unwisely, you'll end up experiencing unwholesome results, or unwholesome Kamma. So the natural law of Kamma, it isn't punishments and rewards. It isn't about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's not anything mystical or magical or anything like that. There's no being who's overseeing this natural law. It's happening and it's functioning at all times, and it's affecting us whether we're aware of it or not. And when we gain wisdom of this natural law, we can make wiser and wiser decisions that is going to lead to more and more wholesome results. In fact, your goal on the path to enlightenment is to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma, because you've made unwise decisions in the past that you're going to need to experience the results of in order to make your way to enlightenment. Through making wiser and wiser decisions, you'll be able to extinguish all of that and get to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome results. So I'd like to welcome all of you today, whether you're joining us for the first time or you're joining us regularly. The way that we do this particular program is I invite students to be able to read a particular chapter. We have 10 chapters that we're going to study today. Anybody in Zoom can electronically raise your hand, and then you can unmute your mic and read any of the chapters that are being shared in today's class. Then I'll share some teachings on that for about 5 minutes or so. Then I'll open up to any and all questions that you guys have. Whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can ask questions by putting that into the comment section, or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So I'm going to switch over to the visual aids so that everybody can see these books. If you don't have access to these books yet, you can easily download them from our website by going to buddhadailywisdom.com. From there, you can get them for free. You can take it and go print it. You can get printed versions here in Chiang Mai at the temple by just reimbursing us for the printing costs, or you can order them on Amazon if you have access to Amazon in your country. That way you might decide to read before or after class, because you'll see that there's a lot of details from the Buddha, there's references there, and then there's words from me to be able to help you to be able to deeply understand these. So studying them on your own is going to really help you. But if you haven't studied them yet, it's okay. You can learn them here in the class, but there's just so much more value in actually taking your time to read the books as we go week by week. So it looks like Pat is volunteering to read this first chapter. So if you'd like to go ahead, Pat.
Thank you. Chapter 1, 6 aspects of Kamma to be understood. Monks, when it was said Kamma should be understood, the creation of Kamma should be understood, the diversity of Kamma should be understood, the result of Kamma should be understood, the elimination of the creation of Kamma should be understood, the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma should be understood. For what reason was this said? 1. It is volition, choices and decisions, monks, that I call Kamma. For having willed intentional choices and decisions, one acts by body, speech, or mind. 2. And what is the creation of Kamma? Contact is its creation. 3. And what is the diversity of Kamma? There is Kamma to be experienced in hell. There is Kamma to be experienced in the animal realm. There is Kamma to be experienced in the realm of afflicted spirits. There is Kamma to be experienced in the human realm. And there is Kamma to be experienced in the heavenly realm. This is called the diversity of Kamma. 4. And what is the result of Kamma? The result of Kamma, I say, is threefold, to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. This is called the result of Kamma. 5. And what, monks, is the elimination of the creation of Kamma? With the elimination of contact, there is elimination of the creation of Kamma. 6. This noble eightfold path is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma, namely, right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. When, monks, a noble disciple thus understands Kamma, the creation of Kamma, the diversity of Kamma, the result of Kamma, the elimination of the creation of Kamma, and the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma, he understands this penetrative spiritual life to be the elimination of unwholesome Kamma. When it was said, Kamma should be understood, the creation of Kamma should be understood, the diversity of Kamma should be understood, the result of Kamma should be understood, the elimination of the creation of Kamma should be understood, the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome Kamma should be understood. It is because of this that this was said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here we have these 6 aspects of Kamma that it's important to understand as you're making your way on your journey to enlightenment, to understanding this natural law. This natural law is not anything to believe in. In fact, you shouldn't believe any of the teachings of the Buddha or anything else in the world. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You're just believing it because either somebody convinced you to believe it or you convinced yourself to believe it. But instead, you're learning, investigating, and examining teachings. You're reflecting on them to independently verify whether they're true or false. And then you're practicing the teachings, integrating them into your day-to-day life so that now you can experience the results of uprooting the pollution of mind so that you can experience more and more peace and joy of the enlightened mental state. So understanding this natural law of Kamma is so key to being able to accomplish that. Because if you didn't understand this natural law, you would be out in the world making unwise decisions and you would keep experiencing unwholesome results. So it would be very challenging to experience peace and joy if you were experiencing all this harm coming back to you over and over and over and over and over again. So you're going to learn today about these 6 aspects of Kamma, and you're going to learn about other aspects too. But in general, it's helpful to understand as you've gotten started here, and if those of you guys that have learned the foundational teachings, you understand that wholesome Kamma is generated through harmless decisions. Whenever you're making harmless decisions, it's going to produce wholesome Kamma. And then when you're making harmful decisions, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma for you. And now the Buddha here is saying in this first aspect of this discourse that it's volition, meaning that it's your intentional choices and decisions by body, speech, and mind that is producing Kamma. There has to be intention behind your decision in order for there to be Kamma produced. So for example, if you were walking out on the street and you were stomping your feet, trying to kill a bunch of cockroaches as you were walking down the street, these are intentional decisions. There's craving, anger, and ignorance there, where the mind is longing, yearning through craving to kill these beings. There's anger, hatred, and ill will towards them. And there's this ignorance where the mind doesn't understand that by harming other beings, harm is going to come to you. So there's going to be this unwholesome results that are experienced. Not only in this situation, but if you're practicing craving, anger, and ignorance towards these beings, the cockroaches, then you're probably practicing exactly the same thing in your relationship with human beings as well. And this is why your relationships are challenged and struggling, because you're not practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom in all your relationships among all beings. So if you have any craving, anger, and ignorance behind your decisions, there's intention there, acting through body, speech, and mind that is harmful. And now as you put that harm out, there's going to be this harm that comes back to you. But you can also make decisions that there isn't any intention behind it. Let's just say that we're walking down the street and our intention here is to walk down the street. And now let's just say a cockroach is running under our foot and we crush it. Well, there wasn't any craving, anger, and ignorance there. There wasn't any intentional killing. So therefore, there isn't going to be any unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results here. So there needs to be intention behind your decisions in order for there to be Kamma generated. And in this situation, the intention is to walk down the street and there isn't any harm there. And that's why there's no harm coming to you as a result of just choosing to walk down the street. The second one, the Buddha is saying that the way that you create Kamma is through contact. So you need to have contact with another being in order to create Kamma, or contact with a particular form or object. So it's contact through the 6 sense bases that is now going to produce the creation of Kamma. Then the diversity of Kamma is how you're going to experience this, in what situations. In all the 5 realms, there's Kamma to be experienced. In hell, animal, afflicted spirits, human realm, and heavenly realm. And as you've heard me share, there is no belief in these teachings. You can independently verify these 5 realms. And you may not have the wisdom of how to do that right now, but as you progress in your journey, you can cultivate the wisdom to independently verify these 5 realms, because you will experience the Kamma that you produce. You can't run and hide from it. And that's part of what's also being described here in number 4, is that the result of Kamma, I say, is threefold. To be experienced in this very life, the next rebirth, or some subsequent occasion, meaning you can't run and hide. Any decisions that you make, you're going to experience the results of that. And then the Buddha says the elimination of Kamma is through the elimination of contact. So if you eliminate contact, there's no creation of Kamma. And where something like this can be helpful for you is when you come together with another person, if they become bitter and harsh and hostile, argumentative, if you stand there and maintain contact with them and you become bitter and harsh and hostile and argumentative too, you are now creating unwholesome Kamma through your body, your speech, and your mind, the way that you're interacting. But if someone's being bitter, harsh, and hostile, and you choose to eliminate contact and you choose to walk away, you're now not creating any Kamma in that situation. And this is how you clean up your relationships. That maybe in the past, when someone was argumentative with you, you would stand there and be argumentative with them right back. But this is just keeping the anger and hatred continuing to bounce around in the room. You're not going to eliminate somebody else's anger. They have to choose to eliminate it. So you can't come out with your anger and hostility over the top of them in order to stop them from being angry and hostile. If they're being angry and hostile and you try to be angry and hostile back, you just got a bunch of fireworks going off in the room. So what you use this particular wisdom to help you understand is that you can walk away in order to eliminate any creation of unwholesome Kamma in these kinds of situations. And it's the same thing. In order to create wholesome Kamma, you need to have contact with individuals. So any kind of Kamma, either wholesome or unwholesome, it's going to need contact in order to be created. So this is how you can use this particular wisdom to help you to eliminate your contact is going to eliminate your Kamma in any particular situation. Then in terms of completely eliminating all your unwholesome Kamma, it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to do this. By practicing all those steps and all those factors of the Eightfold Path, you would be making wise decisions. And now putting wiser and wiser decisions in the world based on the natural laws, you're going to flush out and eliminate all your unwholesome Kamma. So it's kind of like in the past, we've had a garden hose that we've been shoving mud into. And then if you're getting on the path to enlightenment, you're hooking it up to the faucet and you're starting to open up the faucet and get some clean water coming through this garden hose. Well, if you just open it up a little bit, maybe you go to the temple or you learn in a class like this once a month or once every 3 months. Maybe you're meditating once a week, once a month. You've got a little drip going through this garden hose, and this garden hose is impacted with mud, and you're not going to clean it out in this lifetime. But if you open up that faucet wider and wider, meaning you're regularly learning, you're attending classes, you're reading books, you're regularly meditating, you're really building up your practice, you've got more and more clean water going through this garden hose. You've got more and more wise decisions going through this garden hose. But it's still going to spit mud for a while because we've put mud in it in the past. So as it's spitting mud, the reason why it's doing that is it's clearing out. It's got clean water behind it, but it's got to get this mud out. As this mud is coming out, there's going to be the occasional clean water. You're going to see some wholesome results here and there coming back to you. But then there's going to be more mud and more mud and more mud. And then there's going to be some clean water. But if you keep putting clean water into this garden hose, you're going to get some mud for a while, but eventually it's just going to be clean water, clean water, clean water. You've got nothing but wholesome Kamma coming back to you because you're only making wiser and wiser decisions through this Eightfold Path. So there's certain relationships right now that maybe you have that are bitter and harsh and hostile, and you're attached and you're having craving, and so is the other person. And maybe you're not committed to that relationship, and it's best to just let that go and move on from the relationship. And that's the way you're going to eliminate that unwholesome karma, by eliminating contact in those relationships. But then there's other relationships that you're maybe more committed to, but you need to do some work on your mind before you can really sort this out. And that's where you need to step away, maybe put the relationship on pause within your own mind, step away, work on your own mind, and then re-enter into the relationship. And now start practicing the teachings more and more closely, where now you can be loving and kind and warm and gentle and respectful in all of these relationships. Then there's a third category of relationships, of brand new people that you haven't even met yet. You don't even know what their names are right now. And when you meet those people, because you're learning and practicing these teachings, you're only going to be loving and kind and warm and gentle, practicing all the factors of the Eightfold Path. And because you're making wise decisions in those situations, you're going to be able to only experience the wholesome Kamma coming back. Because as you're being generous, loving and kind, and practicing wisdom, you'll see more and more of these things coming back to you. So this is how you clean up your life and you clean up your relationships, is you let go of certain relationships that are problematic and that you're not committed to, and you know that it's going to be too much of an uphill battle to be able to solve this challenges in your relationships, and you just would rather move on from it, but you're going to need to train your mind to let go and understand that that's okay. Then there's certain relationships that you're going to need to put on pause mentally, and then step away and work on your own mind, and then come back into the relationships. And then there's a third category of brand new people that you haven't even met yet, that you'll only ever be loving and kind. And now that's what you'll experience coming back to you. So by making decisions more and more through the Eightfold Path, that's putting the clean water into the garden hose and flushing out all these unwise decisions from the past. And this is what's going to extinguish all your unwholesome karma. An example of this might be, like, say you did a lie or some problem in the past on your government forms, and now the government caught you 3 years later, and they're sending you a notice of penalty and interest and money that you owe them. Maybe you owe them $3,000, $1,000 for the amount that you originally owed, $1,000 penalty, and $1,000 for interest. Well, if you didn't know the Eightfold Path and you didn't understand the natural law of Kamma, you would probably maybe rip up that piece of paper and throw it away, maybe trying to run and hide from this. Maybe you would call up the government or write them a nasty letter and be really nasty in your contact with them. But that would just create new Kamma, which is really unwholesome. But if you understand this natural law of Kamma and what you're working to accomplish to do, you would like to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma. And now you would make decisions through the Eightfold Path, accepting responsibility for this error, this mistake, this lie, whatever it was. And now maybe you would call up the government or write them a nice letter, and you would politely ask them if there's a way to work this out, that you don't have $3,000. And through you being polite and kind and friendly and warm and respectful, maybe they drop off the penalty and the interest. And now there's $1,000 that you owe. And now maybe you don't even have that. And maybe you talk with them some more very politely and kindly, and they work out a payment plan for you so that you can pay it over time. And this is someone who's working to extinguish their unwholesome karma from the past, because you're not interested in having any cobwebs in the closet or any dust in the corners. You would like to clean up all of these things from the past. And here, what the Buddha is explaining to you is that this entire spiritual life is to eliminate your unwholesome karma. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to do that. As I've mentioned, by the time you get to enlightenment, you're only experiencing wholesome karma. You'll experience wholesome results in your day-to-day life. Your mind will be focused, concentrated, clear. You'll have deep memory. Your personal, professional relationships will be blossoming. You'll notice that you're not even in a bad mood anymore because you've eliminated the causes and conditions that are producing it, the pollutions. And one of the things that you need to clean up in terms of cleaning up your unwholesome karma is cleaning up the mind, eradicating the pollutions of mind. And it's through acquiring wisdom that's going to allow you to be able to do that. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 1 of volume 6. It's 6 aspects of Kamma to be understood. Okay, it looks like Marcy might have a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
David. So would it be correct for the mind to think of choices decision as a generation of generating karma, and that the actual, when you make contact with another being, that is when the karma is actually created?
Yes. So any choice or decision that you make, it's going to produce Kamma. And this is why the Buddha teaches that even just to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you need to have what's called careful attention. You need to pay careful attention to every single decision you make. Because with craving, desire, attachment, the mind's going to want to run and run and run and run and run and run, right? It's going to want to run forward, and it's going to want to hurry up and make a lot of decisions. And what you're looking to do as part of your practice with breathing, mindfulness, meditation, and other things is knock down that craving and restrain the mind and pull it back so you can think through all your decisions. And as you're first starting to do this, life can feel like it's very slow compared to what you're used to. But this is really helpful because you're intentionally making one decision after another. And when you have contact, you're now going to experience Kamma with that individual being. But you can also experience Kamma through contact with other things, not just an actual human being. So if I went out and stole a car, I haven't had any contact with a human being, but I had contact with a material object. And now with that contact of that material object and having stolen the car, now I'm creating Kamma there too. So it's not just contact with a human being. You can create Kamma through contact with someone's house. If someone wasn't home and you went and broke out all the windows, you're creating Kamma there too. So anytime you're creating Kamma, there's going to need to be contact somewhere. And that's why oftentimes if your mind is angry or frustrated or agitated, the best thing to do is just go away, go in a quiet room somewhere where you don't have contact with anybody or anything. You just sit there and calm your mind down. And this is going to help you to now re-enter into the world with a calm mind so that you can make wise, intentional decisions with careful attention.
So when someone has a decision to make in life, right, and they take the time, that volitional choice of decision and the time that they're taking to think about it can fluctuate from becoming a wholesome Kamma to unwholesome Kamma to wholesome Kamma as they're trying to figure out the right way. Is that a correct way of thinking about it?
Yeah, as they're thinking through their decision, they haven't made any decisions yet. They're just thinking it through. And that's where you need to be able to look at it objectively with a clear mind. When your mind is all shaken up with craving, anger, and ignorance and those pollutions, you'll have difficulty seeing clearly what would be wise in any given situation. But when you can step back from the situation, calm the mind down, and make sure that the craving, anger, and ignorance isn't circulating in your mind, you'll be able to make wiser and wiser choices. And eventually, you'll get to the point where that craving, anger, and ignorance isn't there because you've cultivated so much wisdom. So part of the path is what you're doing is you're bringing your practice up to the Eightfold Path, and you're practicing that for an elongated period of time. And while you're there practicing all these teachings, you're paying careful attention to all your decisions, and you're implementing one decision at a time into the world, and you're seeing what are the results that come back. And this is helping you to cultivate wisdom about the natural law of Kamma. Whereas if you're rapidly making a bunch of decisions into the world, you're not able to see what any one particular decision is necessarily producing. So you're hindering yourself from being able to cultivate the wisdom of this natural law. So you would like to, in process, as you're making decisions, sometimes you're going to need to consult with me, your teacher. Sometimes you'll consult with the books. Sometimes you'll watch videos and podcasts. Other times you'll just make the decision on your own. But the natural law of Kamma is the most unbiased teacher you'll ever find, because it's going to show you every moment of where you're making wise or unwise decisions based on the results that are coming back to you. So whenever you're experiencing unwholesome results, just look at the decisions that you made that led to that particular thing, and now figure out how to do it differently next time. And then what'll happen is you'll be able to more easily make decisions in the future, where you go multiple years slowing down your decisions, and because you're cultivating wisdom and really intentionally making these decisions. Over time, you're still not making rapid decisions, but you'll more easily be able to make decisions in the future because you will have already cultivated wisdom, and you'll have that wisdom on board of exactly what to do in any given situation.
So it's most beneficial, though, when you do see like an arising of any kind of craving or desire to step back from that decision and say, wait a minute, there's craving, desire here. Let's let this go for a minute, and let's calm the mind again, and then reevaluate it. Is it also normal, like when you're sitting here and you're having this process of trying to cultivate a wholesome decision, where the mind will, you say, okay, if I make this decision, A, B, or C, or D could happen. Now, A could be positive, B could be positive, D doesn't look so positive. Is it normal for the mind to think through the process of the choice? So if I make this choice, these are the results that could possibly happen.
Yes, that's what you would like to do, where the Buddha teaches you to reflect on any particular action before you actually do it and determine, is it going to cause harm to others, cause harm to you, or cause harm to both? And in that situation, you would be interested to avoid that. And if you have really big, impactful decisions, that's where you need to reach out for help. It would be wise to do that. But if they're kind of smaller ones, you might try to just go ahead and implement things that you think are best, and then just pay attention to it to see how that particular decision works. Because the Buddha doesn't teach you every single little decision to make in any situation, because each situation's unique and there's so many different variables. So in some situations, you might just make a decision based on your own reflection and your own learning, and then observe what happens. But with really big, impactful things, it makes sense to talk with someone who knows the natural law of Kamma better than you. And then that way you can cultivate wisdom and be more assured that whatever decision you were planning to make is either, 100% solid, or you need to, modify one thing or another, and that will help you as you go forward.
Thank you very much, Teacher David.
Yeah, you're welcome. Looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
I had I think we talked about this before as well. When you're making certain decisions, you are only making decisions based on the information that you have. That may or may not turn out to be the right decision based because you don't have all the information. So an example is, from my perspective, going and working for, you're applying for a job, you get a job somewhere, and you think the company is good based on an external understanding that this is a good company, it is doing well, everything seems to be good. But then you get there and you go through the interview process. Your team looks good, your manager looks good, but then you get there and you see that your manager is making unwholesome decisions, whether they have a lot of craving, or the CEO has a lot of craving. They're making not the great decision is based on cravings, and so in that case, even you think you made the right decision. Is that still a right decision because you're making decisions with limited information, and will not produce unwholesome karma in some other way because you may end up working for a company which is not making the right decisions?
Yeah, so in these kinds of situations, you would like to make the very best decision that you can. And that's why when you go in for a job interview, you would be wise to be interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you, and talking with multiple people at different levels in the company would be really wise. Understanding that any company that you're going to work for today, especially in the Western world, people are going to have craving, anger, and ignorance. There's no company out there in the Western world that every single being is enlightened. So if you're joining a company, you're going to be joining a company of craving, anger, and ignorance, and you're kind of trying to assess how much of that is there and what kinds of decisions does this company make. And that's why you would like to interview people at different levels of the company so that you can get a good assessment and understanding of what is going on here in this company and how are things being decided, so that you can make the most informed decision as possible, realizing that there isn't going to be a situation where you're working for an enlightened being, because that's very unlikely in the Western world and in these large corporations right now. In the future, this could all change, but for the present moment, you're going to work among people who have craving, anger, and ignorance.
Okay. And the other question, just to reiterate what Narsi was asking, was there's some basically just having thoughts or when thinking through decisions does not produce karma, right? I mean, there is some other monks who say that and every thought is like a desire. That's not true, right? I mean, it's only through contact. Yeah, I mean, you have to think through some decision and make a decision before that karma is produced, right? It's not like every thought is not a desire.
Yeah, so you're producing Kamma when there's contact. So if you're just sitting in your kitchen thinking about what you should or shouldn't be doing, you're not producing Kamma in that situation. You're just having thoughts at that point, and you're just kind of thinking through your decision. But once you act upon that, that's where you're actually experiencing the Kamma. You can see it here where the Buddha talks about when one acts by body, speech, and mind, not just sitting there thinking. So if there's monks that are talking about that, they're not understanding the natural law of Kamma.
And one last, I guess, just to expand on the first part, where like the company can also expand it to like country, right? If you are going into where you're living in a country which you say you move to country for a job or some other thing, or where the government is great, it actually does mostly good things for the people. And then suddenly there's a change in government, and then they're based in more craving and anger and ignorance. And in that case, are you producing any unwholesome karma at that point because you're living in a country which is probably not doing the right? Mostly, I mean, they're doing some right thing, but a lot of things they're doing are maybe not correct.
Yeah, your decision to live in a country where it's being led by someone with extensive amounts of craving, anger, and ignorance, you're going to experience the results of that decision, of your decision to reside in a particular country where there's a significant amount of craving, anger, and ignorance. And that's why it's so important not to cling to any of your decisions, because in certain situations, it could be wise to let go. You shouldn't cling to anything, but if you are clinging to a country, for example, it would be wise to let go and potentially move somewhere else. And this is what would improve your Kamma in that situation, because you can't make a decision that is going to change the leader of your country because it's based on multiple people making a decision. So this is like a group Kamma based on the individual decisions. It still comes down to individual decisions, but as a whole, this community of people are going to have a certain type of Kamma based on the leaders that they've chosen.
So the last question on this. So if to be enlightened, you have to extinguish all your unwholesome karma, can you be in a country which has unwholesome leaders, and because of that you're producing unwholesome karma? Can you be enlightened in a country which in that kind of country if you live in that country?
Yeah, you can be enlightened. Yeah, you can be enlightened. The thing is that you will have set yourself up in such a way that those decisions made by the leaders aren't affecting you in unwholesome ways, that you will have insulated yourself from that. Like maybe you've opened your own business, or you're doing things in such a way based on decisions that you're making inside of another company, that the decisions that the leaders are making, you're not being affected by those things.
But you just said there is some group karma that is created regardless of what you do, right? If you're living in a country, you would, regardless of whatever you do, there'll be some group karma that'll be, even if you're not making decisions. So suppose a country goes to war with some other country, even though you're not doing anything to kind of participate in that war, just by the fact that you're living there, would that we have some group karma come onto you, right, or not?
Yeah, there's Kamma there, but you're not experiencing any of the unwholesome Kamma because you are making only wise decisions. So I think I understand what it is you're getting at, because the way that you've talked about the leadership change that is about to come in America, but you can get to enlightenment while still living in a country where there's a leader that might have extensive amounts of craving, anger, and ignorance. And if they go to war and there's a war, let's just say people bombed the USA, you're going to experience the results of that, but you're going to die in one way or another. You're going to die. Death isn't necessarily unwholesome Kamma. In some situations it is, but it's not necessarily. So if somebody's gotten to enlightenment and they're living in a country and this country was bombed and then they ended up dying because of that, they're still experiencing wholesome Kamma because they're not going to be reborn, right? The death itself isn't the unwholesome Kamma because we're all going to die. By this point, they've extinguished all of that, so they're not going to experience any rebirth.
I was actually trying to the other way where you're trying to get to enlightenment, but because you're experiencing unwholesome Kamma because of the decisions of the leader. Can you even get to enlightenment in that case? Because you cannot extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma.
It's the decision.
You're experiencing some Kamma because of other people's decisions.
It's the decisions that you're making that is leading to your Kamma. It's not the decisions from other people. So if, let's just say, the leaders changed America from a democracy into a dictatorship, your decision to continue to live there, that's what's producing your Kamma. So if you chose to continue to live there, you're going to experience the results of that decision. But now you could choose to leave and go somewhere else. And that's probably what an enlightened being would end up doing. They probably wouldn't be interested in living in a dictatorship, for example.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. All right, Marcy, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Vibha, for asking that question. So, Teacher David, would it be correct for the mind to understand that the analogy where we are producing our wholesome Kamma, that we're filling that bucket up with wholesome Kamma, is what will insulate us from the external Kamma that's created by, the country that we live in or the people that surround us? Is that a good way of thinking about it? That because this being Marcy is practicing the Noble Eightfold Path and is filling her bucket with wholesome Kamma and not creating any harm in the world, that whatever decisions may be made on a larger scale, and we'll use country for example, even though I may experience some of that, it's not my unwholesome Kamma that I am generating. Is that making sense?
A little bit, but let me explain this because I think it's going to help you, Vibhav, and others too.
Okay.
As an enlightened being, if you've extinguished your unwholesome Kamma and you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma, that doesn't mean that you don't ever experience any things in the world that you would prefer not to experience. So, for example, when I went to the USA in 2022, we were walking across the street and there was this car at this one city that was stopped kind of like towards the middle of the intersection, and another car that was barreling down the street, and it hit its brakes and it was angry at this taxi cab in front of it, and it wound down its window and it started throwing plastic cups and things out of its window. It started throwing it at the taxi cab, right? So when we saw that, we were crossing the street and we had just got onto the sidewalk and we saw that was happening, but we just kept walking, right? We were unaffected by it. Our mind wasn't upset. It wasn't angry. It wasn't frustrated. We just all kept walking. Where in the unenlightened state, because of the mind's craving, anger, and ignorance, when they see something like that, they might get triggered, and now they might make unwise decisions to go over there and start yelling and hollering at the driver, or maybe they're just even see what's going on and then they become angry themselves. So just because you've extinguished all your unwholesome Kamma and you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma, it doesn't mean everything in the world happens the way you want it to happen. You're still going to experience things like this in others. Like even yesterday when I was coming home from the temple, I changed lanes and the person behind me was really upset and they were laying on their horn and yelling out the window. They were so upset that I changed lanes in front of them. They even followed me for a period of time, kept honking the horn, got in the lane next to me, wind down the window, throwing their hands up and down out of the window. You're still going to experience these things, but your mind is going to be unaffected by it. And you're not going to make unwise decisions that's going to allow that to turn into something else. So what I did when this was occurring is I just let off the accelerator and I let the person go in front of me. I just got as far away from that person as possible because I was interested in eliminating contact. This person, when they were behind me, I wasn't going to do that. But once they got to the side of me and they kept honking their horn next to me and winding down their window and so forth, I just got off the accelerator, and that way they would just keep on going in front of me. So this is how you can use knowledge of the natural law of Kamma, that elimination of contact is going to eliminate the Kamma. So now that person was able to just go right ahead in front of me.
Thank you, Teacher Dave. I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, you're still going to experience certain things like this. It's just that your mind's going to be unaffected by it. So my wholesome Kamma was that my mind was completely calm and peaceful and joyful in that situation. So I was not experiencing any unwholesome Kamma in that situation. It was just an experience that occurred because there was a being who had craving, anger, and ignorance behind me. So when I changed lanes, whoa, they got really upset. So now that I'm interacting with a being who has craving, anger, and ignorance, I'm going to step away and eliminate contact.
Yeah, that's probably where the harmony and relationship series probably comes in really well to help someone be able to learn that balance by, functioning in a world of many craving beings. Thank you.
Okay, sure. There's a question coming in from Luke on YouTube. He says, if contact produces Kamma and not thoughts or intentions, does that mean if I accidentally step on a bug, it produces the same Kamma as if I did so on purpose? You're not understanding 100% what I've shared. There needs to be contact as a prerequisite in order for Kamma to be created, but there does need to be intention behind that decision in the contact. So in a situation where you accidentally step on a bug, you're not producing any unwholesome Kamma there because there was no intention to kill this being, which is very different than when you walk down the street and you're stomping on bugs as you're walking down the street in order to intentionally kill them, because now you're making decisions based on craving, anger, and ignorance versus the unintentional decision of just walking down the street. Your intention here is to just walk down the street, and that's not producing any unwholesome Kamma. So now when the bug runs out under the bush and under your foot, now when you step on it and kill it, there's no unwholesome Kamma there as a result. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So now let's move to chapter 2. Would someone like to read this? Okay, looks like Marcy. Go ahead, ma'am.
3 causes of the origination of unwholesome Kamma. Monks, there are these 3 causes for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. What 3? Craving, desire, greed, attachment is the cause for the origination of unwholesome Kamma. Anger, hatred, ill will is the cause for origination of unwholesome Kamma. Ignorance, delusion, unknowing of true reality is the cause for origination of unwholesome Kamma. Suppose, monks, seeds that are intact, unspoiled, not damaged by wind and the sun's heat, fertile, well preserved, were deposited in a well-prepared ground in a good field and received proper rainfall. In this way, those seeds would grow, increase, and mature. So too, any unwholesome Kamma, monks, created through craving, born of craving, caused by craving, originated by craving, ripens wherever the individual is reborn. Wherever that unwholesome Kamma ripens, it is there that one experiences its results, either in this very life, or the next rebirth, or in some subsequent occasion. So too, any unwholesome Kamma created through anger, born of anger, caused by anger, originated by anger, ripens wherever the individual is reborn. Wherever that unwholesome Kamma ripens, it is there that one experiences its results, either in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or in some subsequent occasion. So too, any unwholesome Kamma created through ignorance, born of ignorance, caused by ignorance, originated by ignorance, ripens wherever the individual is reborn. Wherever that unwholesome Kamma ripens, it is there that one experiences its results, either in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or in some subsequent occasion. These are the 3 causes for origination of unwholesome Kamma.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So this is a chapter that you guys probably saw a portion of when I've taught the natural law of Kamma in other programs and other courses and retreats. Here, what the Buddha is explaining to you is that it's these three poisons or these three unwholesome roots or these three fires that is the creation and origin of unwholesome Kamma, that it's craving, anger, and ignorance. Whenever you're making decisions through any of these three, that's what's going to produce unwholesome Kamma. Craving is those selfish desires, the longing, yearning, wanting things to be satisfying for yourself all the time, that craving of permanence, that unquenchable thirst, the longing, yearning, thinking the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide lasting satisfaction. And now the mind forms its feelings based on whether you get that or not. The mind is craving this permanence, wanting things to be a certain way, expecting them to be a certain way. And when you get them that way, you get happy. And then when you're not getting what you want, you get angry or frustrated or some other painful feeling. And now when this anger is arising, the mind becomes unskillful. It will end up pushing people away or pushing the situation away. This is called aversion. The mind thinks it's solving its problem, but it's really not, because it's the craving that's causing the problem. It's not the individual or the situation. So pushing away a person or pushing away the situation doesn't eliminate your craving. So now the mind's anger, pushing this person away, it thinks that it's solving its problem, but it really hasn't. Or you might be bitter and harsh and hostile through your intentions, your speech, or your actions. And now it's almost like an animal growling and roaring at another animal, trying to fear it into doing things your way. The mind's trying to get those cravings fulfilled, and it thinks if you growl and roar at this other individual through your bitterness and hostility, you'll get what you want. And then there's those expectations that the mind will tend to try to pressure other people into doing things your way. And now the mind once again is trying to get those cravings fulfilled. And it's all coming from this ignorance or this unknowing of true reality, that the mind just lacks wisdom, that it thinks that other people are making you angry or annoyed or frustrated. So it's because of this ignorance that the craving and anger continues to exist in the mind. And whenever you're making decisions through this ignorance, which is a lack of wisdom of the natural laws of existence, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma. Just like when you make decisions through craving and anger, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma. And you can see this in your life whenever you've made decisions, even with the slightest little bit of craving in there, it's going to produce unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results for you. So you're going to need to extinguish all your craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a way of referring to the 10 fetters at a higher level. The 10 fetters are the deepest level of detail of these pollutions that the Buddha talks about. But when we talk about them from a high level, we can talk about them as craving, anger, and ignorance, because this really summarizes all the 10 fetters. So what you're doing is gradually bringing down your craving, anger, and ignorance, and gradually bringing up the wholesome roots or the wholesome aspects of the mind, where you're making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, which are the exact opposites of craving, anger, and ignorance. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. You're welcome, Luke. Pleased to help you. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so let's move on to the next one. This next one is very similar to the one that we just discussed, so I don't think we need to read this one. This is the Buddha once again talking about the origination of unwholesome Kamma through craving. And what he's talking about here is he's talking about having craving for things in the past, craving for things in the future, or craving with things presently. And what you can understand here is that your mind can crave things from the past, that whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome results. So let's just say in the past you were really rich and you had lots of material wealth, where now in the present moment you don't have those same material objects. If you're craving and longing and yearning for those things in the past, and maybe now in the present moment you're trying to hurry up and get back to that level of wealth that you had before, you might be stepping on people within your own company because of your cravings. Maybe you're doing backhanded things to just hurry up and get back to that level of wealth you had before. And now because of your craving for things in the past, in the present moment, you're generating all this unwholesome Kamma because you're trying to hurry up and get back to something that you had in the past. Or say that you had a trip planned and you really wanted to go on this trip and it's 3 months from now and you're longing, yearning for this thing in the future. And now, because you're so excited to go, when you show up to the airport and you find out that your flight is delayed or canceled, Now you're maybe angry and bitter and harsh with the ticket agent at the airport. And now that's going to produce unwholesome Kamma for you. So the Buddha is explaining to you how craving for things in the past and the future, and then also, of course, presently now in the present moment, is producing unwholesome Kamma. That's always going to produce unwholesome Kamma for you. And then he goes into talking about how to produce wholesome Kamma, where you don't crave things in the past or the future or presently. Remember, these cravings, these desires, these expectations, these wants, this is the longing, yearning. This isn't a goal. If you have a goal, which you're just gradually working towards something with wise decisions, where you have a goal, objective, or interest, this is going to help you to accomplish the things that you need to accomplish. But oftentimes people set goals and they think it's a goal, but it's actually a craving, desire, attachment masquerading as a goal. So if you set a goal, and if you get that goal, you get so happy and excited, but if you don't get it, you'll get angry and frustrated. That's not actually a true goal. That's a craving, desire, attachment. The mind is longing, yearning for it. So you would like to set a true goal, which is you just gradually work towards a certain objective or interest. And now, whether you attain that goal or not, you don't form your feelings based on it. And now when you look and you're like, oh, okay, I'm 80% of the way to my goal, I haven't obtained it, you can either choose to add resources in order to help you accomplish this goal. You can extend your timeline to give you more time to accomplish this goal. Or you might look at it and be like, hey, 80% of this goal is completely fine for me. I don't need to go any further. I'm done with this. I thought that I needed 100%, but I actually don't. I'm completely fine with this, right? So it's important to learn how to create goals and not form your feelings based on whether or not you accomplish them or not. But instead, you just gradually make your way towards it. Because if you lived on one side where you are craving, desiring, attaching, and longing, yearning, and chasing after things, you're not going to be peaceful and joyful there. But if you're on the other side where you could care less about what happens in your life and you have no objectives and no interest to work towards, you're not going to be peaceful and joyful there either. So you need to come to this middle where you can gradually work towards goals, objectives, or interests, but you're not forming your inner feelings based on them. You're not chasing them, and you're not lackluster about them, but you're gradually working towards them through wise decision making with careful attention in your decisions. So I think this is everything. Yeah, this is everything in this particular discourse where the Buddha is teaching you to not have craving, desire, attachment for things in the past, in the future, or in the present. Any questions on this one? All right, I'm not seeing any questions. So let's see what the next one is. We have several here that are somewhat similar. So yeah, let me talk through this one too, so we don't need to read it. It's describing the origin of wholesome Kamma, which is just the opposite of the one that Marcy read, where instead of having craving, anger, and ignorance, which produces unwholesome Kamma, here it's the opposites of those that is producing wholesome Kamma. So it's non-craving, non-anger, and non-ignorance. What this is generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. These are the wholesome roots, because generosity is the exact opposite of craving. Craving is that chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting things to be self-satisfying. This is where the mind becomes very selfish. Generosity is just the opposite. It's giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. Sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. Then the anger, the hostility, the bitterness, the opposite of that is loving kindness, a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. And then the opposite of this ignorance or the unknowing of true reality is the wisdom, when you're making decisions through wisdom. So whenever you're making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, it's going to produce wholesome Kamma. So I'll give you an example of this, that when I first started teaching at this temple where I teach here in Chiang Mai, there's a pack of dogs that live there, probably about 5 or 6 dogs. And when I would show up, of course, they're functioning through craving, anger, and ignorance. And there were times where they would start to bite me and try to attack me. And they would bark, 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 right? And they would be so upset because they were craving for only certain people to be in that temple. And when they saw somebody that they didn't know, this was impermanence to them. And their craving kicked in, their anger kicked in, and it's all from this ignorance. And they started acting unskillful with their barking and, even nipping me a couple times. So understanding this, I was like, all right, well, let me generate some wholesome Kamma here. Let me practice some generosity. So I went out and bought a big bag of like 20 kilos of food, and I bought a whole bunch of wet food and canned food and some treats, and then I started feeding them, right? So this was like my generosity. I didn't have any expectation behind it, but this was my generosity. And then I had this loving kindness. I had a genuine interest in seeing them be well, because considering they're street dogs, I know that they scavenge for food, and they're probably hungry, and they're probably grumpy because they're hungry, because they're having that craving for permanent comfort. And then where this was coming from was the wisdom of the path to enlightenment. So I started practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. And now there's never any issues with these dogs at all. That over a period of multiple times of feeding them, they now have acclimated to me, and they see me as an individual who's friendly with them. Of course, they're not practicing unconditional love. They have certain conditions, right? Like if you feed me, I will like you. And if you don't feed me, I won't like you, right? This is the problem with the animal world. But when you have wisdom of these teachings and the natural laws, you can actually transform what you experience on a day-to-day basis. So you can see this in various situations that you're in, that if you're experiencing unwholesome karma with your family members and things like this, you can practice some generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. But you need to do that without any expectation of anything in return. And this is what's going to transform your relationships when you start practicing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. So let me know if you guys have any questions here. This is just helping you to understand what produces wholesome karma, which is generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Okay, Marcy, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. So my question is about generosity with not having any expectations for anything in return. So one of the places that I do shopping at here in the United States is Ocean State Job Lot. And Ocean State Job Lot runs these programs where if, for instance, like the recent one was if you buy a jacket for a particular amount of money, you end up getting what they call a crazy deal card, which is basically funds that you could purchase future products at Ocean State Job Lot. I will always partake in these, one, because it does help someone. It's for vets or children's or, people that don't have the means to have winter coats. But also it benefits my this being Marcy in my family, because then I'm able to get products at a cheaper discount. Something like that, though, it is there is generosity there, but there is something coming back. But my intention isn't to do it because I get something back. The intention is to do it because I'm practicing generosity. But because I receive something back, is that not pure or true generosity?
Yeah, it's not 100% generosity. The store is practicing generosity that, actually, they're not even practicing 100% generosity, because you're purchasing something from them and then they're giving you something back, right? So this isn't 100% generosity on either side.
Okay. Is it still a wise decision to do, though? Or,
it can still be helpful, right? Like if you have a choice to purchase things from one place or another, and it's a place where you know that the proceeds are benefiting a certain population that's in need, you might prioritize purchasing something there versus somewhere else. And this can still be a wise decision. So that's coming from the wisdom, right?
Gotcha. All right. Thank you, Teacher David.
Yeah, you're welcome. So when you're making and producing wholesome Kamma, it doesn't mean that generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom are being practiced all at the same time. It could be that you're just practicing wisdom in a certain situation, but there isn't any generosity or loving kindness there. So, but it's still producing wholesome Kamma because you're basing your decision in wisdom. Okay. All right, let's move to the next chapter. Let's see. All right, chapter 5. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, looks like Vibhav hasn't read yet, so we'll go with Vibhav, Marcy.
Inconceivable matters. Monks, there are those 4 inconceivable matters that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive them would reap either madness or frustration. What for? The experiences of the Buddhas is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. The experiences of one in the jhanas is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. The exact result of Kamma is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. Speculation about the world is an inconceivable matter that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive it would reap either madness or frustration. These are the four inconceivable matters that one should not try to conceive. One who tries to conceive them would reap either madness or frustration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. So these are four things that the Buddha is saying it would be unwise for you to try to figure out the exact detail of any of these kinds of things. So the first one is the experiences of a Buddha. So a Buddha's teachings is what's going to lead to your enlightenment, and you need to understand those, and that's what's going to actually lead to your enlightenment. But exactly how a Buddha awakens to enlightenment, you would reap either madness or frustration if you tried to figure this out. A Buddha understands this and they could explain it, but for other people to try to understand it, it's not easily understood by another person. So the Buddha is saying that it would be unwise for you to try to understand the intricate experiences that an actual Buddha has on their way to enlightenment, because you're not going to be able to understand that because you're not going to have the same wisdom as an actual Buddha. So rather than trying to look at this so closely, because it would lead to madness or frustration, instead learn his teachings. That's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. The same thing is true about someone who's in the jhanas. If what the jhanas are these preliminary phases that the mind is experiencing enhanced qualities before you get to the first stage of enlightenment. And then there's the second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment. The fourth stage is where the mind is actually enlightened. So if you weren't in the jhanas, it would be unwise to try to understand it with intricacy of exactly what the jhanas are. You do need to know in general what the jhanas are, so that as your mind is starting to experience them, you'll know that that's what they are. But trying to understand exactly what the jhanas are would reap either madness or frustration. It's kind of like if you've never had chocolate ice cream before, and I sat here and tried to explain it to you, you would have madness or frustration if you tried to understand the intricacies of what chocolate ice cream was without having ever experienced it. So through experiencing the eating of chocolate ice cream, then you will know what chocolate ice cream tastes like. And it's the same thing with the jhanas, that you need to generally understand what the jhanas are. And then when you're starting to experience them, you'll know that that's what they are. And then you'll know what the jhanas are. But trying to conceive exactly what the jhanas are while you're not in the jhanas, the Buddha is saying it would reap either madness or frustration. The same thing is true about Kamma and the results of Kamma. That trying to understand the exact result of Kamma is an inconceivable matter, because Kamma is experienced differently by different people, depending on the situation. Sometimes people ask the question like, if I murdered this person, what is going to happen to me? You know, they're looking for an exact one-to-one, almost like a decision tree. This isn't possible because everybody's going to experience Kamma differently. We can understand generally, like if you kill somebody, these are the types of things that are going to happen. Or if you steal somebody's car, these are the types of things that are going to happen. And you can see that it's an unwise decision. But the exact result isn't conceivable. And if you tried, it would reap either madness or frustration, because everybody experiences Kamma slightly different. But you can understand the natural law of Kamma and what is wise and unwise, and the general idea of what will or will not occur in any given situation. Then speculation about the world is an inconceivable matter. What this is like trying to understand the world based on a lack of wisdom and a lack of understanding, like not having pure evidence of something that exists in the world. This is like conspiracy theories. If you or somebody you know has ever been indulged in conspiracy theories where they're just speculating about what may or may not be occurring in the world, they don't actually have tangible proof or evidence, you can see that it leads to madness or frustration. So the Buddha is teaching you to not speculate about the world, but instead to gain evidence and be able to see with your own eyes about any particular aspect of the world and making decisions based on truth rather than speculation. And that's what's going to lead to your continued improvement, because now you're making wiser and wiser decisions based on actual truth rather than speculation or a lack of evidence. So these are the four things that the Buddha is sharing that you would reap either madness or frustration if you try to conceive these. And where a discourse like this is helpful for you is that you understand, like, yeah, let me understand the teachings of the Buddha, but I don't need to understand every little intricate detail about his life and what he experienced, because that would be unwise. So focus on the things that are really important. No need to understand all the intricacies of the jhanas, but understand generally what they are. So when you're experiencing them, you'll know that. No need to understand the exact result of each aspect of the natural law of Kamma, because that would be madness or frustration. But instead, make sure you understand the natural law of Kamma in detail, and you understand what is wise and unwise, so you can awaken to this natural law, but you're not sitting there obsessed trying to figure out every last little detail. And then whenever you're making decisions about the world and you're looking at the world, it's important to have evidence about any particular aspect of your life rather than speculation or indulging in conspiracy theories. So this will really help you to focus on what really matters and what is really possible for you to understand about the world, where these four things, the Buddha is saying, going into any level of obsession is going to just reap madness or frustration for you. So let me know what questions you guys have here on these four inconceivable matters. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So now we'll go to chapter 6. But is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, looks like Yihang. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. 10 courses of unwholesome Kamma. Impurity by body, kunda, is threefold. Impurity by speech is fourfold. Impurity by mind is threefold. And how, kunda, is impurity by body threefold? Here, someone destroys life. He is murderous, bloody-handed, given to blows and violence, merciless to living beings. He takes what is not given. He steals the wealth and property of others in the village or forest. He engages in sexual misconduct. He has sexual relations with women who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by their teachings, who have a husband, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one already engaged. It is in this way that impurity by body is threefold, and how kunda is impurity by speech fourfold. Here someone speaks falsehood if he is summoned to a council, to an assembly, to his relative's presence, to his club, or to the court, and questioned as a witness thus: "So, good man, tell what you know." Then, not knowing, he says, "I know." Or knowing, he says, "I do not know." Not seeing, he says, "I see." Or seeing, he says, "I do not see." Thus he knowingly speaks falsehood for his own benefit, or for another's benefit, or for someone insignificant worldly benefit. He speaks argumentatively. Having heard something here, he repeats it elsewhere in order to divide those people from these, or having heard something else elsewhere, he repeats it to these people in order to divide them from those. Thus he is one who divides those who are united, a creator of divisions, one who enjoys separation, rejoices in separation, finds pleasure in separation, a speaker of words that create separation. He speaks harshly. He speaks such words as are rough, hard, hurtful to others, offensive to others, bordering on anger, unconducive to concentration. He indulges in idle chatter. He speaks at an improper time, speaks falsely, speaks what is unbeneficial, speaks opposite to the teachings and the discipline. At an improper time, he speaks such words as are unwise. unreasonable, rambling, and unbeneficial. It is in this way that impurity by speech is fourfold. And how kunda is impurity by mind threefold. Here someone is full of longing, craving. He longs, craves for the wealth and property of others, thus, oh, may what belongs to another be mine. He has a mind of ill will and intentions of hate, thus, may these beings be slain, slaughtered, cut off, destroyed, or obliterated. He holds wrong view, ignorance, unknowing of true reality, and has an incorrect perspective. Thus, there is nothing given, nothing sacrificed, nothing offered. There is no fruit or result of wholesome and unwholesome actions. There is no this world, no other world. There is no mother, no father. There are no beings spontaneously reborn. There are in the world no ascetics and Brahmins of right conduct and right practice, who, having realized this world and the other world for themselves by direct knowledge, experience, make them known to others. It is in this way that impurity by mind is threefold. These kunda are the 10 courses of unwholesome Kamma. It is because people engage in these 10 courses of unwholesome Kamma that hell, the animal realm, the realm of afflicted spirits, and other bad decisions are seen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So here, this pretty much matches to the 5 precepts, but there's more detail here than just the 5 precepts. It's very clear what the Buddha is talking about, which is talking about these unwise decisions by body, speech, and mind. He's talking about destroying life, stealing, sexual misconduct. Those are bodily actions. Those match up with the 5 precepts. And in the 5 precepts, you get even more detail on these things. Then he talks about speech here, which is pretty much matching up to the 4th precept, but he's going into more detail about this. And he's talking also about right speech from the Eightfold Path, where he's talking about falsehoods, argumentative speech, harsh speech, and idle chatter. Then the one by mind, he's talking about craving, anger, and ignorance, the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots. And this is what's producing the unwholesome Kamma, is that when you act by body, speech, or mind. And he's going into detail on some of the things that are unwise to be able to practice. So I think that these are all very, very clear here. But if you guys have questions, let me know. I can answer any questions that you guys have on this particular discourse. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. All right, I'm not seeing any questions here. This next chapter is very similar to the previous one. This is just talking about the wholesome side. So if you guys haven't read this, I suggest that you do read it, because we're not going to read it in class today. But I suggest that you do read it, because this is showing you what you would be wise to practice, where the other one might be showing you some of the things that you're actually doing now that are unwise, but this is the direction that you would like to head towards, and this is what you would like to be practicing in order to be able to move closer and closer to enlightenment. So here you can see the Buddha talking about these things, which are very helpful for you to be able to see. So for example, he says here, abandoning or having abandoned harsh speech, he abstains from harsh speech. He speaks such words as are gentle, pleasing to the ear, and lovable, as go to the heart, are courteous, desired by many, and agreeable to many. So here he's going into detail about what it would be wise to practice. And this is going to help you to more deeply inform your practice and be able to see what it is that you would like to practice. And this is going to then guide you closer and closer to enlightenment when you're actually practicing in this way. So he gives you details here that aren't in the other chapter, but it is the exact opposite. But he's going into detail in ways that would be very informative for you to be able to practice. So if you guys have read this and you have questions on it, let me know. But if not, I suggest that you guys do read this after class if you haven't read it already. So let me know if you guys have questions here. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So now let's go to chapter 8. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Keely, go ahead, ma'am.
New and old karma. Monks, I will teach you new and old karma, the elimination of unwholesome karma, and the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma. Listen to that and attend closely. I will speak. And what, monks, is old karma? The I is old karma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, choices, decisions, as something to be felt. The ear is old karma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The nose is old karma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The tongue is old karma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The body is old karma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. The mind is old karma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, as something to be felt. This is called old karma. And what, monks, is new karma? Whatever action one does now by body, speech, or mind, this is called new karma. And what, monks, is the elimination of unwholesome karma? When one reaches liberation through the elimination of unwholesome bodily action, verbal action, and mental action, this is called the elimination of unwholesome karma. And what, monks, is the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma? It is this noble eightfold path, that is right will, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Thus, monks, I have taught old karma, I have taught new karma, I have taught the elimination of unwholesome karma, I have taught the way leading to the elimination of unwholesome karma. Whatever should be done, monks, by a compassionate teacher, out of compassion for his disciples, aspiring for their welfare, that I have done for you. These are the feet of trees. Monks, these are empty hearts. Meditate, monks, do not be complacent, lest you regret it later. This is my instruction to you. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So here, there's old Kamma and new Kamma. So far, you've learned about wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma. Wholesome Kamma is any decisions you make that are harmless, and that's making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Unwholesome Kamma is any decisions that you make through craving, anger, and ignorance. These are harmful decisions. But then there's new and old Kamma. So you can have old, unwholesome Kamma. And then there's new Kamma, that you're either generating new Kamma that is either wholesome or unwholesome. So you can have old Kamma that is wholesome as well. So it's important to understand these 4 types of Kamma. So far you understand wholesome and unwholesome, but now we're looking at new and old. What old Kamma is any decisions that you made in the past that you're experiencing the results of now in the present moment. And some of the old Kamma that you're experiencing is based on the physical body. Anything related to the physical body at the time of birth and shortly thereafter, that is old Kamma from a previous life. But also in the present moment, any results that you're experiencing from the past, whether it's a year ago or 3 days ago, that is old Kamma that you're experiencing. And you're going to experience either wholesome or unwholesome old Kamma. But now in the present moment, you have the ability to produce new Kamma, where you can create new Kamma for what you're going to experience now in the future. So that is any decision that you're making now in the present moment based on body, speech, or mind. So that example that I gave you with the taxes, where you got this letter from 3 years ago where you maybe lied on a tax form, that is old, unwholesome Kamma that you're experiencing now in the present moment. And depending on what you do now in the present moment, it's going to produce new Kamma. And that new Kamma is either going to be wholesome or unwholesome based on the decisions that you make. Well, if you rip it up and you throw it away, or you call up the government and write them a nasty letter or whatever, and you're acting through wrong intention, wrong speech, wrong action, well, it's going to produce new unwholesome karma. And now you've got new unwholesome karma to deal with. But in the present moment, you also have the ability to make wise decisions that is going to produce new wholesome karma. And that's what you would like to be able to do, is make more and more decisions in the present moment that are wise. And that's what's going to be the fresh water coming through your garden hose and opening up that faucet as wide as possible, making wiser and wiser decisions in all situations. And that's what's going to lead to the extinguishing of all old unwholesome karma. Because when you make decisions to eliminate your unwholesome karma, you're going to need to do that through the Eightfold Path. Whereas if we don't know the Eightfold Path, we might lie or cheat or steal or have sexual misconduct or any of these other things that are leading to unwholesome results in our life. But when you understand the Eightfold Path and you've independently verified it and you're practicing it, now you're making wiser and wiser decisions. And you're getting to the point where you're starting to extinguish any old unwholesome karma that's coming back to you by making new decisions in the present moment that are wise, so that you can have more and more new wholesome karma. And the Buddha is saying here at the end that whatever he's taught and whatever he's done, he's doing it out of compassion for his students, aspiring for their welfare. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others. Because a Buddha's mind is so peaceful and so joyful, they fully awoke to the natural laws, and now all they're doing is dedicating the rest of their life to helping others to be able to experience the same mental state. And then he encourages his students to meditate, not be complacent. And of course, there needs to be meditation in order to get to enlightenment, but you wouldn't be able to just meditate your way to enlightenment. You need to understand discourses like this, where you're learning about the natural law of karma. If you were just meditating and you didn't have all the other teachings to go along with it, you would never be able to get to enlightenment. One of the biggest myths about the life story of the Buddha is that he sat under a tree, he meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. And this is just not true. That you're going to need to cultivate wisdom, and you're going to need to go out into the world and practice making wiser and wiser decisions. This is where you can see getting to enlightenment is gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. But there is a certain amount of meditation that is needed, and that's why he's encouraging his students here to actually meditate and helping them to understand that his decisions are based in compassion for them, because he aspires for their welfare. Let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is helping you to understand new karma and old karma. All right, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the next chapter, which is chapter 9. Let's get all the way down there. You can see I explained this for you guys. This is chapter 9. Anybody would like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Yihang. 1 second. There we go. Yeah.
Thank you. This body is old karma. Monks, this body is not yours, nor does it belong to others. It is old karma, to be seen as generated and created by volition, choices, decisions, as something to be felt. Therein, monks, the instructed noble disciple attends carefully and closely to dependent origination itself. Thus, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of these, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of these, that is eliminated. That is, with ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases. With the 6 sense bases as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the origin of this whole mass of discontentedness. But with the reminderless fading away and elimination of ignorance, unknowing of true reality, comes elimination of volitional formations, choices, decisions. With the elimination of volitional formations, elimination of consciousness, all aspects of dependent origination. With the elimination of birth, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair is eliminated. Such is the elimination of this whole mass of discontentedness. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Yihang. So the first part of this chapter, the Buddha is explaining that this physical body is old Kamma, because we didn't make the decisions in the past to be able to get to enlightenment. So because of that, the mind was still polluted in our previous life, and that's what created this next life. But now in this life, you have an opportunity to extinguish that. But what you're experiencing in this life, by being in existence, it's old Kamma. It's old, unwholesome Kamma. But there was a certain amount of wholesome Kamma to be able to get into this human life, because getting into the human life is the ideal existence, to be able to now extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma. In those animal existences, we couldn't cultivate enough wisdom to be able to practice in such a way to get to enlightenment. We couldn't practice 100% generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom because our consciousness wasn't capable of being developed to that point. But now in this human realm, even though we were born based on our unwholesome Kamma from our previous lives, there was a certain amount of wholesome Kamma to be able to get us into this human existence. And this body that we're experiencing is unwholesome Kamma. It's old Kamma from the past. But now we have the opportunity to extinguish that. And that's where the Buddha here is now explaining dependent origination, because this is how to escape out of this cycle of rebirth, so that you don't have to keep experiencing this old Kamma of coming back over and over and over again. Because while there's certain enjoyable things about life, and particularly once you get to the enlightened mental state, you'll be enjoying all aspects of your life. But there's a certain amount of misery and despair that comes with this. If as long as there's birth, there's going to be aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So if you allow there to be another birth, there's going to be continued aging, death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. But when you dismantle dependent origination, that's what's going to lead to the elimination of your discontentedness and continuous rebirth. And the way that this works is because it's like a domino effect, that you can see the very first thing is ignorance. That's what's keeping all of this stuck. So it's because of ignorance that craving continues in the mind, and that is what's leading to discontentedness. All this sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. So if there's these dominoes, all you need to do is eliminate this first domino. If you can eliminate that first domino, you'll be able to completely dismantle all of dependent origination. And what you do is you cultivate wisdom. That's where from the very beginning, when students first start learning with me, I teach them not to believe anything about the path to enlightenment or the teachings of the Buddha or what I say or what's in books. Because with belief, you still have ignorance because you don't know what's true or false. You haven't independently verified it for yourself to get to wisdom. But when you cultivate wisdom, now if you're making all your decisions, your choices and decisions come from wisdom, you'll completely dismantle all of this. But with a lack of wisdom, that unknowing of true reality, craving and anger will continue in the mind. So the Buddha here is reminding you that this is the way to get rid of this old unwholesome Kamma of continuing to be reborn over and over and continuing to experience discontentedness. When you're experiencing discontentedness in the mind, that is unwholesome Kamma. You're continuing to experience unwholesome Kamma because there's still ignorance in the mind. So if you have annoyment or frustration or agitation or annoyance, this is your unwholesome Kamma. This is old unwholesome Kamma. But now in the present moment, you have an opportunity to produce new wholesome Kamma by cutting that off and letting it go. Cutting it off and letting it go. Eliminating that craving that's producing that discontentedness. And by doing that, that's what's going to completely transform the mind and dismantle all of dependent origination. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to guide you in how to eliminate and dismantle and completely destroy dependent origination and all these causes and conditions that are leading to discontentedness and continuous rebirth. Namely, this ignorance. You need to cultivate wisdom. And that's why you're looking to learn, investigate, and examine the teachings. that you reflect on them to independently verify them, and then you practice them, integrating them into your life, and then training your mind on a consistent, ongoing basis. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 9 in volume 6. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So let's move to the last chapter, chapter 10. This is the last one for today. Looks like Pat is volunteering to read that one. Go ahead, sir.
The most reprehensible for the performance of unwholesome actions. Then the Nagantha Digha Tapasi asked the perfectly enlightened one, "And you, friend Gotama, how many kinds of rod do you describe for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action?" Tapasi, the Tathagata, is not accustomed to use the description rod, rod. The Tathagata is accustomed to use the description action, action. But, friend Gotama, how many kinds of actions do you describe for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action? Tapasi, I describe 3 kinds of action for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action, that is, bodily action, verbal action, and mental action. How then, friend Gotama, is bodily action one, verbal action another, and mental action still another? Bodily action is one, Tapasi, verbal action is another, and mental action is still another. Of these 3 kinds of action, friend Gotama, thus analyzed and distinguished, which kind of action do you describe as the most reprehensible for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action, bodily action or verbal action or mental action? Of these 3 kinds of action, Tapasi, thus analyzed and distinguished, I describe mental action as the most reprehensible for the performance of unwholesome action, for the carrying out of unwholesome action, and not so much bodily action and verbal action. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action, Tapasi. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action, Tapasi. Do you say mental action, friend Gotama? I say mental action, Tapasi. Thus the Nagantha Digha Tapasi made the perfectly enlightened one maintain his statement up to the 3rd time, after which he rose from his seat and went to the Nagantha Nataputta. Thereafter, the householder, Upali, came to the perfectly enlightened one to ask about the conversation the perfectly enlightened one had with Nagantha Tapasi, and discussed that the bodily action is the most reprehensible for the performance of unwholesome act, for the carrying out of unwholesome action, and not so much the verbal action and mental action. The perfectly enlightened one, however, maintained his doctrine and spoke further. What do you think, householder? Is this town of Nalanda successful and prosperous? Is it populous and crowded with people? Yes, venerable sir, it is. What do you think, householder? Suppose a man came here brandishing a sword and spoke thus: "In one moment, in one instant, I will make all the living beings in this town of Nalanda into one mass of flesh, into one heap of flesh." What do you think, householder? Would that man be able to do that? Venerable sir, 10, 20, 30, 40, or even 50 men would not be able to make all the living beings in this town of Nalanda into one mass of flesh, into one heap of flesh, in one moment or instant. So what does a single trivial man count for? What do you think, householder? Suppose some ascetic or Brahmin came here possessed of supernormal power and attained to mastery of mind, and he spoke thus: "I will reduce this town of Nalanda to ashes with one mental act of hate." What do you think, householder? Would such an ascetic or Brahmin be able to do that? Venerable sir, such an ascetic or Brahmin possessed of supernormal power and attained to mastery of mind would be able to reduce 10, 20, 30, 40, or even 50 Nalandas to ashes with one mental act of hate. So what does a single trivial Nalanda count for? Householder, pay attention how you replied. What you said afterwards does not agree with what you said before, nor does what you said before agree with what you said afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So here, this individual is trying to get the Buddha to explain to him what is the most reprehensible way to act. Is it body, speech, or mind? And the Buddha says that it's the mind, that when you have a mental action, this is more harmful than a bodily action or a verbal action. And then they go through this analogy to be able to understand why. Because in this town, there wouldn't be able to be one bodily action that would destroy the town. You couldn't kill everybody in the entire town with just one bodily action. But if there was one mental action of hate, this now ripples throughout the whole town and it can destroy the whole town. So it's the mind that is the boss and the body is the employee. That if somebody has a certain mental action, this is going to produce a ripple effect, because everything that you experience is coming through the mind. So the only reason why there's bodily actions and verbal actions is based on the mind. So if you purify the mind, then you're going to purify the bodily in the verbal actions. So this is why everything that the Buddha is teaching you is focused on purification of the mind, because that's the origin of anything that you're choosing to do in your day-to-day life. That your bodily actions and your verbal actions are all coming from the mind itself. So if you enter into a town and there was a particular hateful action, that would ripple across the town over multiple days and weeks and months, and now more and more hate would be spewed all throughout the particular town. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter, because this is helping you to be able to see why you're focused on the mind. Yes, you need to focus on your bodily actions and your verbal actions as well to purify those so that you're not making any unwise decisions. But those decisions about your body and verbal actions are all coming from the mind, and that's why you like to purify that. And that's also why when you're in relationships with people, you're not interested in having hateful thoughts and harmful thoughts, because that's going to produce bodily and verbal actions that are going to now produce unwholesome results in your day-to-day life. So you would like to purify the mind so that now you can purify your bodily and verbal actions. So it looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. So would it be wise for the mind to think that there is an intention or a thought that then turns into a mental action when that action is created by the body or the speech?
The thoughts and ideas, that's part of the mind now forming a particular mental thought or a mental action that is now going to come through in your speech or your bodily actions.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. This is why it's so important for that mindfulness, right? The Buddha teaches, right, mindfulness, to be aware of the mind. It's like that virus scanner that's constantly looking at the mind. And if you see something unwholesome, you cut that off and let it go. You don't even let your mind walk down that just, 2 or 3 steps. As soon as you see the mind looking towards something unwholesome, you like to cut that off. Like if the mind's being conceited and judgmental of other people, cut that off. You notice this act of hate where you want to do something harmful to somebody, cut that off. You're noticing any kind of thoughts or ideas that are unwholesome, you cut those off, because then it won't come through in any kind of speech or actions, because that's what's going to now produce more unwholesome Kamma for you. So if you can stop it at the mind, now you can easily purify your speech and your actions. And let me see what else we might have here. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else from anybody. So next week, we're going to be moving into the next 10 chapters, volume 6, chapter 11 through chapters 20. If you'd like to read those ahead of time, you'll see the words of the Buddha, you'll see the reference, and you'll see the words that I'm sharing with you to be able to reflect on that and bring it into your life through your day-to-day practice. And this will help you to get more fully informed as you're progressing forward in this program. Tomorrow in the group learning program, I'm going to be teaching the 3 poisons, which goes really well along with what we've been studying here. which is craving, anger, and ignorance. So if you need a refresher on that, I'm going to be teaching what those are in detail, and I'm going to be teaching the solutions. And if you haven't learned this from me at all, this would be a great time for you to learn it. So it's going to be Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Thai time and 9 p.m. Sunday Thai time. So depending on where you are in the world, you need to look at your time zone and see. I'll be teaching at the temple in the morning, and then I'll be teaching in the evening from home here. But it's the same talk, and it's just in a different location. So you could attend either one of those, or you could watch the recordings, because you're going to need to know what craving, anger, and ignorance is in order to be able to understand the natural law of Kamma. And what your goal is on this path is to extinguish and eliminate craving, anger, and ignorance. Then in about 10 days or so, maybe 8 days or 9 days, we have a retreat coming up. It's the retreat that I teach each January, where it's developing a life practice to attain the first stage of enlightenment. It's going to start on a Sunday at 3 p.m. here in Thailand, and then it's going to go all the way through Friday, the 24th. So you guys could attend that live. Maybe some of the classes you'll be able to attend live. Maybe others you need to watch by the recording. You're able to attend here in Chiang Mai or through our live stream, because I'll be live streaming all these classes. So you'll be able to learn all the teachings that you need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment in one actual retreat. So thank you all for joining. Thank you for reading. Those of you guys that read, thank you for your questions and your interest to learn. Perhaps I'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Be well and take care. Have a lovely rest of your day. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.